We all had good conversations yesterday, good conversations in the bar last night. Long may they continue. So I'm just here today really to introduce the events of this morning and this afternoon. So first of all, this morning we have got an indoor session. We've got two different topics, one on invasive species and another on training, learning, engagement, participation. And then this afternoon we're going to go out. So all you need to remember is listen to everything this morning, participate, engage with it, ask your questions, keep thinking about how everything you're hearing about today, how we're going to continue to do more of this, because we've had a great effort and resource through this programme, but we need to continue it. We need to make sure that we're spreading it to other Dune managers outside of the programme, outside of the SAC system. We need to inspire them. We need to make sure that we all want to get back together in a few years' time without having a project that makes us do it, and that we want to bring additional colleagues with us. So that's my challenge to all of you. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Reinhardt, who's going to introduce the presentation for the first session on invasives, and then Natalie is going to chair the panel session afterwards.
Thank you. Okay, hello everyone, I'm Reinhardt from Belgium. I work for the Nature and Forest Institute and I'm project coordinator for the LIFE DUNIAS project. I'm going to give a small talk about invasive alien plant species in the dunes. First of all, some very nice habitat types that we can find in our Flemish dunes. I think they also grow in the other countries in the Atlantic coastal region. For example, these very nice humid dune slacks with a lot of orchids, Dactylorhiza incarnata and so on. Very beautiful dune habitats with some very nice species. The natterjack toad we have at our western coast. Ipactis palustris, some spurge hawk moth, the Queen of Spain fritillary, all beautiful species living in our dunes. The grass of Parnassus, the tree frog, we have it at our eastern coast in Belgium. The thyme, dune pansy, a dune tiger beetle, the grayling, that's some kind of a dune grasshopper. So a lot of beautiful and very nice animals and plants living in our dunes. But unfortunately, a problem that's occurring in all the Atlantic coastal zones, unfortunately. These invasive alien species, for example, the Rosaregosa you can see here, I think the problem is very clear on this picture. It can grow in enormous, massive stands. We know clusters from more than 1 hectare in size along our coast. And it's not the only species. We have identified more than 50 invasive herbaceous scrub species alongside our Flemish coast. The problem is clear, the sunlight can't penetrate the leaves, so everything is shaded between these plants. So you can see it's a very low diversity. You see monotone stands of this Rosaregosa, maybe some Senecio iniquidens here, maybe some grasses, some festuca grasses, but that will be it. So a very monotonous vegetation, unfortunately. But luckily for us, the LIFE DUNIAS project got approved at the end of 2021. We could start with the project. During this project, we will tackle invasive alien shrub species in all our Flemish dunes. So in red is the project area, that's around 4,000 hectares. And it covers the entire Flemish dune system, so that's the entire special protection zone that we have. A very strong element of our project is that we have 16 partners, being all largest managers, dune managing companies. So that's very interesting for us because we can tackle invasive alien species in an area covering way. We can tackle them everywhere in our Flemish dunes because of this partnership. The project will last until 2026, the end of 2026. And we have around 7 million euros, from which 60% is co-financed by Europe. These are the most important actions from our project. So we will purchase around 30 hectares of privately owned dune, after which we will also tackle the invasive species in these dunes. We will tackle more than 50 hectares of invasive scrub in our dunes. Of course, we will do some monitoring actions afterwards to see how the nature restores after we tackle this invasive species. We do a large communication campaign, sensitization campaign. We have 2 international workshops. One took place last year. Some of you guys were there. It was really interesting. I'll talk some more about that workshop. We'll also have a final conference at the end of our project, so that will be in 2026. And of course, an afterlife conservation plan will also be part of our project. And in this plan we will handle how we will tackle invasive species after the LIFE DUNIAS project, so a very important plan. As I said, we will have a lot of sensitization and communication actions during our project. First of all, we will sensitize the professional sector. It's a big problem. A lot of these invasive species are still sold in greenhouses and so on. That's a very big problem. So we want to sensitize this problem at its source, meaning we will sensitize high schools, universities and colleges. I'm giving guest lectures to all these schools with relevant courses, biology, bioengineer, public greenery and so on. And after my talk, we ask that they add the lecture into their curriculum, so that the lecture will be given yearly after we pass by the school. So that's one of the things we do. We also sensitize the horticultural sector, so we also give presentations about the problem, about alternative species you can plant instead. We'll also sensitize in magazines of this horticultural sector. And we'll also personally visit garden centers. As I said, they are still sold in large quantities. Firstly, we do some inventories to see where invasive species are still sold in these centers. And afterwards, we'll go to the managers of these centers and have a talk with them. And in the best case, they will ban some of these invasive species from their centers. And centers wanting to work with us, we will reward by mentioning them on our website and on our social media and so on. And we will also couple some media, some press attention to it. So we hope that we can stimulate other garden centers to work with us in this way. Secondly, we will raise awareness amongst coastal municipalities. Also a big problem, species like Rosaregosa, Mahonia, Cufolium are still planted at our Flemish public greenery along the coast. I think it's a bit of the same problem in your regions, I think. So we are making lists with plants that coastal municipalities should avoid, and other lists with plants they can plant that are indigenous in the region. We'll also organize guided walks with city councils. Then we will have a look at the specific problem in each coastal municipality. And municipalities that are wanting to work with us, meaning that they will ban invasive species from their municipality, or that will be more planting indigenous species, we will also reward. The reward will be an indigenous tree with a yard sign, a board, telling that the community is doing a great work. And we will also couple some media attention to it. We hope that this will stimulate all municipalities to be with us. I have foreseen 10 awards, so I hope that all 10 of the municipalities will be with us at the end of the project. So I hope the media, the press attention will stimulate these majors and so on, because they like to be in the news. So we will see how that works. And then lastly, also very important, the private gardeners will also sensitize. Because a lot of people don't know what are invasive species, they don't know what they can plant, what they should plant instead, and that's why we will be also giving guest lectures to private gardeners. We made, for example, a poster with invasive species in the dunes. At the back of this poster we have alternatives that you can plant instead of this invasive species. We'll also do community-based eradication actions with private gardeners, but also with school children, with youth movement clubs, meaning that we will go into the dunes and eradicate some easily invasive species like Sinucio iniquidens, Hyardica species and so on. And also personal contacts are very important in our project. So we'll do a desktop screening and we'll have a watch where invasive species escape from private gardens in our dunes. And afterwards we will go personally to these gardens and ask, can we go into your garden and have a closer watch? Afterwards we will give them a list with the species occurring in their garden, and we'll have a talk, and in the best case they will ban the invasive species from their garden and they will plant alternative species. So that was an overview of the communication actions. This is maybe the last communication slide. We also have some social media pages. Please follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, just type LIFE DUNIAS, then you will find our pages. We have an exposition that travels alongside all these communities. We made a poster, I'll talk about it. We have a movie and so on. We made a brochure, I'll put it at the entrance. You can all take it if you are interested. So that's our project in a nutshell. Now I will talk a bit about some management actions we will be doing the next years. Firstly, Rosaregosa. Each time we will see a map in the right side showing the distribution of the invasive species. So in red you can see the distribution in the Atlantic coastal region, and blue is the distribution in the other parts of the country. So it's clear for Rosaregosa, it grows, it grows everywhere in our countries. So basically for this species we will dig until a depth of 1 meter with an excavator. Afterwards we'll put it in a mobile drum sieve. You can see that big white thing over there, that's a mobile drum sieve. So it turns around, all the sand gets sifted through the meshes of 2 centimeters in diameter, whereas all the plant materials stay in the sieve and it will be put to a public waste company. But the sand will be deposited again in the dunes. Very important, we calculate a buffer zone of 1 meter around the above ground stands, so we will dig up to 1 meter around the visible stands. Follow-up is very necessary, so don't just tackle it once, go back the years after. Maybe with the spades, just have a look where new shoots grow out of the ground. Other methods that can be used, for example in Denmark they use burying, but chemical treatment can also be relevant. But we will mostly be focusing on this excavator method for Rosaregosa during our project. Oregon grape, another species we will tackle during LIFE DUNIAS. Basically it's the same method as Rosaregosa, but we know the roots don't grow as deep as Rosa. So here we will dig up to a depth of half a meter, and then it's quite the same as Rosa. So sieving, also with the buffer zone, and follow-up is also very important for this one. This is a nice picture of a mossy dune in the Westhook where we were during the BioBlitz. Some of you guys attended our BioBlitz last year, and here you see the encroachment with this Mahonia, unfortunately. Another species is Chalice Alsbury, also known as the goji berry. I saw some at the dinner, at breakfast this morning, these superfoods, these berries. So, but it's a threat in our Flemish dunes. Unfortunately, we have multiple hectares of this species in our dunes. Basically, we'll use the same technique as Rosa and Mahonia when there are large quantities of this species. So we will also dig it out to the depth of half a meter. We did some tests with some spades, and it seems it doesn't root very deep. So half a meter will probably be sufficient. Small stands we will just put out with a small crane or with a shovel or with a winch. So we don't have to disturb all the dunes with a big excavator in the case of small stands. But follow-up will also be important because it's known that the roots can regrow from small remnants. Then Tree of Heaven, it's one of the union lists. Yeah, it also grows in a lot of countries, mostly in France, the Netherlands, Belgium. Here we will pull this species out by hand or by an excavator. We did some tests in sandy dunes. It's quite easy to pull it out when they are quite young. Larger trees are they are more difficult to remove, so there will be need of an excavator to pull them out of the ground. It's important to take the entire root system. I think it's a case with with most invasive species to take out the entire rooting system. Follow-up will be necessary, of course. And here we see a nice great dune in the city of the Panna being overgrown by Alianthus altissima, unfortunately. Then another species, also from the union list, is Bacharis halimifolia. It mostly occurs at the French coast, a bit in Belgium, but in the UK it doesn't seem to be a very big problem. You see some red dots. This one we will pull out with an excavator or with a winch. We also did some trials. It doesn't seem to root very deep. So it's quite easy to pull it out of the ground. But the problem is that this plant has seeds that can disperse by wind. So very important to do a follow-up treatment, to have a closer watch to the site the years after where you remove this species, because seeds can easily germinate because of this wind-blown seeds. So follow-up is very important. So these were only 5 species from the more than 50 shrubs that we will be handling during our LIFE DUNIAS project. So the last part of my presentation is about the workshop we had last year, where some 5 or 6 of you, maybe more, were present. It was very interesting. It was a very practical workshop. We did a lot of discussing, some practical brainstorming workshops. It was really nice. We did some talks about the specific problem in each country. We did some talks about the management, how to remove invasive alien species. But the most interesting part was a scoring practice, where we did some horizon scanning to look for what's the invasiveness per species. I will show this on the next slide. So here you can see our very nice group, and here's some brainstorming sessions. And this is the report we made. I brought some with me. I don't have lots. It's also in PDF version, so please contact me afterwards and I can send it with a PDF to you guys. First of all, on this slide you can see some risk scores for some invasive species in our dunes. The maximum score that the species could get was 625. This was based on invasiveness, on impact on biodiversity, on likelihood of spread and so on. So each of the participants had to give scores on a scale of 5, and then all these scores we multiplied, and the maximum score a species could get was 625. And we had 12 species in our dunes with this maximum score. They are listed here. So you can see the Aleanthus growing here, the tree of heaven. Berberis acifolium bacharis is on the list. Carpobrotus, unfortunately, it grows after this building on the rocks. So please kill it if you want. It doesn't belong here. Here you see the Mahonia. Crassula is also a very naughty one, very difficult to remove. So very interesting list. I think it's a bit of a problem in all the countries across the Atlantic region, the species you can see here. And then the second part of the report is the real horizon scan itself. This is a picture on which you can see the number of occupied grid cells. So meaning the occurrence of invasive species in a 10 by 10 kilometer quadrant. And here you see the score of these species. And the green lines are the medians. So the interesting dots are the red dots. So meaning these are species that don't occur a lot in our coastal regions, but have a high impact, can have a high impact on biodiversity. So these are the real horizon scan species, species on which we should focus in the future, base our early warning systems and so on these species. So very interesting practice we did. This is the example for the sandy habitats. So we made a listing of species that can become more invasive in the future for sandy habitats. For example, this is Acaina novazelandica. There you can see Berberis juliana, but also some ligustrum species, some vaccinium species and so on. So a really interesting list for the sandy habitats. That's the second list we made for the salty habitats. Here you can see Aloe arborescens. Also some other species, Opuntia species that are already a little bit invasive in more southern regions, and so on. And lastly, we made a list for the shrubby habitats, so 2160 and 2180 habitat types, with the Amelanchier spicata on this picture in the left, and this is Acaina anserifolia on the right, but also Populus species and so on. And then my last slide is also very interesting. Also per country we made a horizon scan list. So here I only listed 3 countries present today, but it's for all the countries of the Atlantic coastal zone. So really interesting list. Here you can see our Carpobrotus growing over here. That might be a threat in Belgium. We don't have it, luckily, but it might arrive there in the future. In the UK, for example, Yuccas might form a bigger threat in the future. In the Netherlands we have this Mesambriantinum species, if I could speak it, that's growing, that's the picture in the right corner. So a very interesting list, so I should say give me a call, I can send this report to all of you. I brought some printed versions, but I only have 4 left, so I think the PDF will be better to distribute. I already shared it with the participants of our workshop, but so I think maybe you shared it to your colleagues, I don't know, but if you didn't receive it yet, just send me an email and I can send it your direction. So very interesting list, so surely have a look at it. That was my presentation.
Thank you, that was really interesting hearing about the work that you've been doing, and really quite similar to what we've been doing in the project. So I'm Natalie, I'm the People Engagement Officer for Sefton Coast, and I'm going to be chairing the panel discussion. So just a little bit of an overview of what we've been doing in the project. So we know invasive species can cause substantial ecological damage, including loss of biodiversity, changes in soil fertility, increased water use, and even changes in water chemistry. So we know that sometimes costly interventions and eradication projects are sometimes essential. So we know that we use manual and mechanical control, but often we have to use chemical control as well. Across our Dynamic Dunescapes project site, we have been controlling quite a few interesting invasive species, including like Japanese rose, Japanese knotweed, but also getting rid of some carp in Dorset. So far the project has removed 116 hectares across our 24 project areas. And we're going to hear a little bit about how we've been doing that. So first up, we've got Ruth, who's going to be talking to us about the work she's been doing in Wales.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good morning. My name is Ruth Harding. I work for Natural Resources Wales. I'm a Senior Conservation Officer for the Comanche Environment team. I'm also the site lead for the protected sites for Cumbria. With the Dynamic Dunescapes funding, we got a bit of a problem there with sea blackthorn, which I acknowledge is native in the east, but it's not native in the west in Wales. So I'll just give you an idea where Pembroke is. We've got Swansea at the south, and we've got Pembrokeshire, so for the northeast. We've got Pembroke in the middle there, and also Pendine, which is part of the Carmarthen Bay, Jeansap. The history is quite similar actually to Brifton boroughs. We've got UXO history there. There was a World War I and a World War II ordnance factory. So there's obviously history with UXOs. We've had to consider UXO risks on the site. At the moment, at present day, at Towing Point we've got MOD presence, so we've got RAF Pembroke Sands, just a weapons range. At the south we've got Pembroke Country Park and the LNR, which is managed and owned by Comanche County Council, which is one of our partners. And then in the middle is forestry estate, planting of the conifers forest. And in front of those is a narrow dune system that we're managing as well. So yeah, that's Cumbria. I wanted to say, we all know dune habitats are important, but I also sort of point out some of the species that we've had, we have on site, as well as protected site. It's a SSSI, Command Bay Jeansap, Command Bay estuaries as well. We've got 300 hectares of dune grassland habitat communities. We've got dune gentian that's just hanging on. I was just talking to Andy, I don't know if Andy's still here, last night. There's only 4 sites now in the UK, I understand, that have got dune gentian. Unfortunately, we've lost petalwork. Our brightlight specialist thinks that it's a bit too dry there at the moment, but you know, in the future we have got it in Pendine. It's doing very well in Pendine. We've got a large dune assemblage. We have got small blue supply because we've got good kidney vetch population. We're not sure about the crucifix ground beetle. Possibly we might have lost that. The Stranded ground beetle is doing very well, and because there's only 3 sites now left in the UK and down in Wales. Yeah, so problems as we spoke about earlier is sea buckthorn was actually planted at the same time that we planted the conifer forest, which is about in the 1930s. So as you can see, it can, if it's not controlled, it can get out of hand. I've got to say that Cassidy and the Sounds of Life, they're working in the SAC, which is adjacent to where I'm working, and Comanche County Council. They've done an excellent job of controlling the sea buckthorn, and also the MOD of the north of the site as well. And Marina's here, has done a lot of, when she was working for the MOD, did a lot of sea buckthorn control. But we still got quite a lot left in front of the forest, which is what Dynamic Dunescapes project has been helping to manage. So what we did, so we've spoken previously and said with other sort of like with the rose, the gentleman who's just gave the previous presentation, is pulling is the best, but we have got a bit of a problem at Pembroke because of the UXO. We think it possibly has been cleared of UXO, but there's no records anywhere. So unfortunately, unlike the Sands of Life area, my area was put as moderate high. So that left me with a bit of a problem. So we did start pulling with a tractor, but it was so slow, and working with the UXO specialists, that it was just taking a long time. And also this went off to biomass, and we found that it was quite contaminated, so I was quite interested in what you said about with the sieve, using the sieve, because with the biomass we're rejecting. So we decided with the health and safety risk, and it was taking so long, we decided to use cutting with tree shears, so cutting at ground at a level, and then it enabled the UXO specialists to go in and do the magnetometer scans. And then with the stuff that you couldn't cut, we stump treating as well afterwards, and we were also mulching, and then follow herbicide treatment. Preparations, obviously we said with UXO, so had to have UXO support and surveys done. Similar to this site, got a lot of rural burn and World War II archaeology, so we had to consider those. I also had to close a public road, which wasn't. It was okay. I did expect a lot more kickback, but that's where County Council helped, and also Hannah, as well, the engagement officer, with plenty of engagement, getting signs out. Protected species were actually fine with things like otters, but I did run into had some funny games with some badgers for an outlying set, trying to find if it was an active set, because the density, you can see the density of the sea buckthorn. Sending our mammal ecologists in, doing a destructive search, and all sorts of cameras out, and finally managed to convince the Welsh Government to give me a licence to cover me. And then when we did it, it wasn't actually, when we actually got close to the set, we discovered that it wasn't been active. But hey ho, these things happen. So this is just a little video of, this is working adjacent to the Sands of Life, so areas to the left you can just see that's the Sands of Life, and then from that track it's a Dynamic Dunescapes, it's area, so it's not the N2K site, it's the non-designated part of the site, as well as a part of the Triple site. So I'll just run this little video if you'll work. Okay, well, this was a little drone footage of with them using the tree shears and then chipping it, and it's going into the lorry. That was then taken off the biomass, because the County Council didn't want any risings left on site. So that's what we did with that. And then other parts of James and Fretwood Forest, we used a mixture of tree shears, chipping. We didn't have to send that off to biomass, because we found areas, sacrificial areas, to put that. So yeah, that's a shame videos not working. There we go. Yeah, so the results, we cleared 22 hectares over the lifetime of the project. Lessons learned, I put burning berries and badgers, and at burnings for the first year we did try and burn, but for the arisings, and it was just, it was a real headache. There was lots and lots of smoke, and it's just that high oil content of it. Also the heat, for the amount as well. I'm very nervous that potentially the forest estate might go up. I'm not keen on burning whatsoever. Also with berries, I think I'll be honest, I underestimated the berries, particularly last year. We had really, really good years with berries. We did try to herbicide treat them previously before we cut them, but there was still a lot of berries, so now I'm trying to think of, in the future, maybe we need to, map where the female plants are, and also stem inject, or maybe go in earlier, but then we've got weeders to consider. Also badgers, saying that the density of the sea buckthorn, and trying to figure out if there's an active set, but we managed to sort that out. Again, engagement, really important. First year I didn't maybe get that quite right. Didn't have massive complaints, but we just didn't do enough. The second, third year, again, Comanche County Council, Sands of Life, and Hannah, thank you so much, helping out for the engagement there, and that made a difference. We didn't, particularly when I was closing a public road as well, because that can go down like a balloon. So that was fine. We had to close down the public road because of health and safety concerns, and it was fine. A couple of rumblings that you'd expect, but nothing major. Yeah, still got more, as you can see, sort of in that picture lower down. We've still got more seed buds on to come out, so hopefully funding allows for the future that we can carry on. And we've also got the regrowth then of the management that we've previously done. Grazing, yeah, for the LNR, they're fine. We've got cattle grazing on there. For the north and the MOD area, they're grazing as well. They've got 10 places, but for the forestry dunes, it's not feasible to fence. So your lecture today with the no fence is inspiring me. So hopefully we can get cattle out there. And I have actually on loan got some no fence collars from the Sands of Life that we're hoping that with a tenant we'll be able to get cattle out there. Also add grazing, because we know we chatted a bit yesterday about grazing, and I know goats are sort of, a bit sort of controversial, but I'm hoping again with no fence collars that maybe potentially we could look at goats, because I'm sort of quite concerned about the regrowth and the amount of chemicals that we have and sort of the sustainability of it. So yeah, anyway, that's Pembroke, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Ruth. That was really interesting. So next up, we've got John, who's going to tell us something else.
Hi, yeah, I'm John Cripps. I'm the ranger for Cornwall Wildlife Trust at Penhale Dunes. I think I have to start by apologising by not having as many invasives as everybody else. So I'm not dealing with 20 hectares of sea buckthorn. It's about a hectare. So it's sort of a little bit more straightforward. I'll press the right button. Right. Yeah, so Penhale Dunes. We don't own any of it as a Wildlife Trust. We have sort of management agreements with the Ministry of Defence. The Ministry of Defence own 350 hectares of it, and Pembroke Sands Holiday Park own another chunk. And then we've got Parish Council own a bit, which has got Cornwall's only beach bar on it, the watering hole, so significant pressure at that end compared to the other end where the MOD don't let anybody on. So it's quite varied, use and a golf course in the middle as well. Just yeah. So luckily all the different landowners signed up to the project, so we're able to deal with invasives on all of their land as part of the Dynamic Dunes project, which was really good because we haven't been able to source funding from anywhere to deal with that in the past. So it was a really good opportunity to move things forward. As you'd expect, sand duning on the Atlantic has got the usual features, fixed dunes and dune slacks with creeping willow. We've got petalwort, we've still got shore dock, which I like to describe as the least charismatic rare plant on the site. But we've got it, it's great, and it's doing all right. We've got early gentian, silver-studded blues, and scrambled egg lichen. So really nice site, lots of really great features. From an invasives point of view, one of the first ones we had to deal with is Cotoneaster. The problem with Penhale, we don't have like these huge stands of invasives like a lot of sites have. We've got little clumps all over the 620 hectares. So trying to find stuff over and retreat it and things like that is quite challenging. Yeah, so we went for a fairly sort of standard approach: either poison it, pull it, or dig it up, sort of thing. So with the Cotoneaster, because it's spread around, yeah, we used glyphosate with mixture B, the adjuvant, to sort of break down the waxy coating on the leaf and help the herbicide go in. Obviously, we'd rather not use herbicide, but because it's so spread out, the easiest way to get around knapsack sprayer on your back and wander around and try and deal with it that way. Half of the site is registered organic, so the MOD area is registered organic, so we couldn't use it there. Luckily, we don't have a huge population there, so we haven't had to do a lot yet. But I think, I don't know if you saw the slide that I think Andy showed the other day of the Ministry of Defence using big diggers to create their sand for me as part of their sort of training exercises. I'm hoping that some of the areas within the MOD bit where we've got Cotoneaster, I can point the big diggers at, and they'll scrape the surface, clear it all off, dig a big hole and bury it, and that'll sort that. Luckily, from an exploded ordnance point of view, The Ministry of Defence came out a couple of years ago, and on a beautiful sunny day, had a sort of stroll around, thought, brilliant, we can get about 6 weeks work here in the middle of summer, Cornish June, it'll be great, but they didn't find anything. So they had to sort of begrudgingly admit that they didn't have to come back and do any further work. So I've got a bit of paper that clearly states, get on with it, but if you find anything that looks dodgy, give us a ring. So we can sort of crack on with fairly basic sort of work. Yeah, so Tony asked her, we're sort of getting on top of it. Where we did spray it, it had really good effects, so it's just sort of left us standing dead at the moment. I did find the golf course went above and beyond on their land, shall we say, and they were particularly good at killing stuff, I think. Sort of amenity grasslandy sort of thing, so they were a bit more used to using chemicals than we are. Monbretia again spread all over the place. In small patches, really, I did get a contractor to try and dig some up on a headland, and he was with hand tools, and he didn't speak to me for a while. The ground was so hard, you've got to get all the sort of corns out, and yeah, he didn't enjoy that. So we went back to spraying with that. Again, its follow-up is important because we've reduced its vigour each year, but it's still present, so I still need to go out and find each individual patch every year, and hopefully at some point in the future we'll have sorted it. But I'm going to try with volunteers in some of the more sandy areas where the ground is a lot looser, and we've reduced the problem down to try and dig out stuff there. I did find on a headland the ponies grazed some of it off, which I'm not entirely sure how palatable an invasive plant like Monbretia is supposed to be for the ponies, but they ate it. It was fine. Yeah. So, and then a final issue at Penhouse Sea Buckthorn. So we went through the sort of herbicide treatment to start with, followed up with a digger, and basically pulled it all out. Did find that where we'd herbicide treated it, the roots were more brittle, so you did leave material behind. So I wouldn't bother herbicide treating it in the future. I'd just get a big digger in and dig it all out. And that was the first time. We didn't have a lot of Andy and Pip did a really good job on public engagement, so everybody knew what we were doing. You know, when there were people with knapsack sprayers out, they knew why they were there and what they were doing. So we didn't have any negative sort of feedback particularly. We had to explain, you know, particularly why we were using herbicides, and it was in small quantities. But we had some pushback on the sea buckthorn because there's quite a lot of foragers locally really appreciate the berries, and they were really quite upset about us removing all of it. But luckily one of them had some land, so we invited them over to take, as we were pulling it out, they bagged it up and took it to their land, so that was just about enough to appease them and keep them happy. So that worked quite well. And then because we're dealing with much smaller quantities, and we dug it all out quite thoroughly, we've got a bit of regrowth, but the regrowth we could manage with the yellow tool on the right there, tree poppers, which is basically just a big lever, put it around the base of the plant and lift it out. I did find that half a day with volunteers is enough on those, because if you try and make them do a full day, it was knackering. Because they weigh a ton, and it's hard work, but it worked really well, and you can sort of follow as you pull it out, you can follow the route along and keep leaving out, so you are really sort of satisfied that you've got the whole plant out. I mean, it only works in small areas, you couldn't do hectares of it, but as a follow-up method, it's low impact, nice day out. I mean, it's a beautiful sunny day when we were doing it, and you can see evening primrose and stuff coming through, so that's pretty much exactly the same spot in the two photos. So you can see sort of 2 years apart, it's a really nice open habitat with druid orchids coming through and all sorts. So it made a huge difference. I think that's it.
Thank you, Joe. So next up, we've got Richard who's going to talk about what he's been doing in Cumbria.
Morning everyone, Richard Stoughton, Cumbrian Project Officer. You're all going to be very familiar with Cumbria by the end of this conference. Our main problem in Cumbria is Rosaregosa. As mentioned yesterday, we have 11 sites, multiple designations, multiple landowners, and multiple situations really. So there's not one simple answer to Rosaregosa. The project brief when I started was to dig up the Rosa, the preferred method, dig up down to a metre and a half, remove all the roots and the stems, and to burn that to get rid of it. So yeah, that was a preferred option at the start of the project. But as I mentioned, we've got lots of different sites, some with hectares like this one of Rosa, others with just small patches. So I suppose as the project's continued, we've adapted and developed different methods for different sites really. Previous to the project, the NNRs who we work with in Cumbria had got this technique similar to Reinhardt's but on a smaller scale. This is an excavator bucket that actually digs the rows out and sieves it as it's doing it. They found it really successful, did a great job, and there was very little follow-up treatment needed after this. So this method was used on North Walney. Another successful techniques prior to the project were just backpack spraying with glyphosate on the NNRs for small areas west of Airfield and then at Average Dunes. So yeah, I started the project. I've got a good technique of getting rid of the Rosa. Everything's looking really not really easy, but I've got a plan in mind. That's how I started the project. This is how I'm going to deal with it. So then this is one of my other sites, Fleetwood, with a massive with hectares of Rosa here. But big problems, lots of archaeology here, and as the project got moving, we realised that other sites were having problems with unexploded ordnance, so all of a sudden things weren't quite so simple. Just digging up with a machine was not an easy option. I sort of looked at this site and from the start and thought, well, yes, we'll dig this, but it was giving me sleepless nights really, because there's promenades, there's big public access, and like I say, archaeology and possible ordnance. So I wasn't sure what to do, really, to be honest. Disposal of the Rosa was also a problem. The partner here was Wire Council, and they weren't keen on us burning anywhere on site. Other project sites, Sefton had got a mobile incinerator which they found really useful, so would that have been a possibility? So we talked with Wire Council, and they eventually said yes, if we created a compound they would allow us to use a mobile incinerator on there. So we were sort of getting slowly towards being able to dig the Rosa up on site, but the public access was also going to be a massive problem. We would have had to shut part of the promenade. On one of the later slides you'll see how close the public access is to the Rosa. So I also looked at other solutions, and although I didn't really want to use herbicide, as the project went on it became more and more of a better option for this site really. The beds were 6 foot high in places, the Rosa. So how would you spray that? You know, an knapsack sprayer is not going to be able to do that. The people using it are going to be all spraying at face height, if you will. So on a site visit to Sefton, and talks with them and sharing best practice as part of the project, I realised that they'd used a contractor down there that used a targeted herbicide, whereas in Cumbria before, the NNRs had always just used glyphosate. So looking at what they'd done down at Sefton, I thought this is going to be so much easier than trying to dig this Rosa up at Fleetwood. So I changed tactics. You can see from this photo here, you can see the Rosa starting to go yellow and brown. We got the contractor that they used at Sefton to come and quote for us, and we got some other quotes, but we ended up using him. he boom sprayed it, so he didn't use well, they did use backpacks, but they have a long boom, so they're not spraying right in front of them. They can reach over the beds for a few metres, 3 metres, and spray. They did the work at 6 AM in the morning on days with no breeze, when there was very little public, on the site. So that proved very successful. So we had to adapt there. A lot of adaptation went on. The NNR teams in Cumbria, previous to the project, had tried different things. They'd tried, as you can see from this side, they brush cut half the rosa patch and stump treated the rosa with glyphosate, and then they just sprayed the other half with glyphosate without the brush cutting. They've been told that this was going to be a much more successful method of killing the rosa, but to be honest, their experiment showed that there wasn't a lot of difference really. It really wasn't worth that effort to brush cut it all first. So I suppose moving forward, that's something we've discounted as a method for treating rosa. We're back to Fleetwood again, so you can see how close the public access and the promenade is to the beds of rosa. You've got some natural dunes on the left over the wall that you can't see, and these are sort of isolated dunes since the promenade's been gone through, which are just full of rosa. So, as I mentioned yesterday, people engagement is a big part of the project. Our partners here were Wire Council, the people engagement officer worked closely with those. We had days when myself and the people engagement officer just sat on the wall on the promenade and talked to everyone coming through to just inform them that we're going to do this work, we're going to do the spraying work. There was quite a bit of public concern about why we're getting rid of these lovely fragrant smelling roses on the promenade, so education was a big part of it. But in the end, yeah, we did the people engagement work and got the community support, and it's had one spray and looks like a really good kill rate off that first spray, and we're going to repeat that before the end of the project. Challenges. So, rosa for us in Cumbria has been slow progress. We were held up with lockdowns and things, but still slow progress. It's not something you do in 1 year, as most of you know who've tackled it. It's an ongoing process. You can see from this slide, the Cumbrian NNR team brush cut the rosa on this patch and then treated it, but this is what they found underneath it. With a strong onshore breeze, any litter was blown into the rosa patch and just held. So when we brush cut it and got rid of the rosa, we were left with this, so we had to follow up with a litter picking, but luckily on the NNR at North Walton, they've got a really good volunteer group who go out every week through the winter litter picking. So yeah, herbicide use, like I say, the NNRs originally just used glyphosate everywhere, but since the projects work with them, we're now moving towards more targeted herbicides which just target the rosa and the woody species. You leave your annuals untouched and your grasses, so far better as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to use herbicide if I can help it, but if I'm going to use it, we use it targeted. And I suppose the other thing we've learned is not, for our sites anyway, for multiple sites in Cumbria, not just one method. If we can use the digging, we will do, as long as there's no problems with the ordnance and the archaeology. So, what's the future? We've got to keep on top of it. It's ongoing, but hopefully the work each year gets less. We work with partners and we've set up local groups. Some of the sites we work on are managed, some aren't. So on the sites that are private landowners, with the people engagement officers, we've got volunteer groups going that will go back after the end of the project and still tackle the rosa, whether that's by pulling or spot spraying. An exit strategy for herbicide, I like to think in a few years that we've really got on top of things and we don't need to use herbicide. That will be the preferred option really. Lessons learnt, I suppose just what I've said really, every site's different, you've got to adapt to a different strategy for different sites. What's been achieved, by the end of the project, we hopefully will be really on top of rosa at all the 11 different Cumbrian sites and make life much easier for people managing those sites after the end of the project. And the legacy will be that, yeah, there is a lot less work to do. It's just a case of keeping on top of Rosa rather than it being a big problem like it was at the start of the project.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. That was really interesting. So I'm going to talk about what work we're doing at Severn Coast. Quite similar problems to Cumbria. The main ones that we've got is Japanese rose and Japanese knotweed. We've got a few areas where they're actually growing together. So at Severn Coast, I haven't actually put an information slide in, but I'll give you a quick overview. So we're the longest continuous sand dune system in England, 20 kilometres. It's all protected, SSSI, Special Area Conservation, Ramsar. It is owned by lots of different landowners. We've got Natural England, we've got 2 national nature reserves on there. National Trust, we've got a reserve. We've got local nature reserves owned by Severn Council. We've got some golf courses, deer land. So we have got a lot of landowners over there. Much of the Rosaregosa isn't on Natural England's land, it is on council or National Trust land. So we've had some work with our partners there to deal with it. Quite interesting, some of the areas on the Severn Coast, and one of the problems that we've got is that actually some of it is made up land. Some of from the Blitz, the rubble from Liverpool was brought to the coast to make up some of the land there. So Rosaregosa loves this land. In all that rubble, there's some asbestos, there's bricks, there's pipe, there's quite some horrible stuff there. And that means that dig and bury isn't a technique that we can use. We've had to use 2 techniques there. So we've got a lot of Japanese rose, probably started as a few plants in the 1970s. We can kind of trace it back to where it came from. And now we've got over 6 hectares across the whole of the coast. You can see on the map all these little dots are all the patches that we have measured. So it is quite a problem on the Severn Coast, and it is pretty much a continuous line of it. So we have used dig and bury where we can, which has been great for getting the bare sand. We've got a whole track on the Severn owned part where it is almost 2 kilometres, massive track where we've dig and bury, and now it's just a lovely track of bare sand. And it's been quite good for the public as well, because it used to be a path that they could use, and it had this huge patch of rosa, so they couldn't use it. So we have had quite a few positive that they are now able to use it, and then hopefully people using this new track will keep it open and keep it there as well. So where we haven't been able to dig and bury on this made up land, and a few of the patches quite difficult for us to get the machines to. We've used herbicide, so in Sefton we're the ones who kind of found the selective herbicide. Our contractor was really good. He went off and did some research and came back to us and like, I think we're going to use this selective herbicide that just targets the shrubs. Been really good. We've actually seen patches where the marrow grass is coming through and it's untouched, it's just targeted the rosa, so it has been really good, and we've shared that with the project, so that has been really good. So that's just a bit of an overview. So engagement, it has been really important to tell the public what we're doing and why we are doing it. Unfortunately, particularly the herbicide treatment started in lockdown, and as I was in Preston, I think I was still in the stage 4 lockdown, we couldn't actually get out and talk to people. So we still wanted to make sure that people knew what was coming up and what we were doing and why. So we used posters, and we went into quite a lot of detail on the posters, highlighting why, what we were doing and the reasons for it on these posters. And we put them up by the massive patches, but also we wanted to target where anyone would go anywhere near these patches. So we put them on paps and the bins. So we put these posters up pretty much across the whole Sefton coast, everywhere. But we also changed the posters as well. So we didn't put them up, let them go ratty. We put them up and we changed what we were saying. So we weren't letting them just leave there, and then people stopped paying attention. So we were constantly changing them, putting new posters up, new information, to keep people going. And then when I could go out, had the June den up. And then when we were talking to kind of Tuesdays, we were talking to dog owners and also talking about the work that we were doing at the Rosaregosa. Done a lot of posts on social media, and I've also gone out and filmed quite a lot of videos, again showing what we're doing and why we're doing it, and trying to get that message out about why we are doing this and how it's going to benefit our species. Did forget to mention that we've got quite a lot of interesting species on the Sefton coast. We are one of the most northern sites for sand lizards. We've got about 40% of England's population of natterjack toads, one of only 2 sites to have a northern June tiger beetle. We've got petalwort. So these are really species that the public and the local people really love. So it's been really quite, not easy, but it's been really nice to be able to say that getting rid of this will help improve the habitat for these animals, and you love these animals much more than you love the Rosaregosa. One of the trickiest sites has been Shore Road, which is a massive patch, a really dense patch of Japanese rose, but there is a lot of housing estates looking right out on this patch. You can just see at the bottom of the map, you can just see the beginnings of the estate that are looking out on this patch. So we did put up posters along the whole of the fence along here, and then we worked with Green Sefton, who own this, to do a letter drop to several streets back to make sure that we were getting everyone who might be asking questions in that area. So we did a letter drop, and then we also included information, the project overview about the project, so that again people were seeing why we were doing it and what this work was going to benefit. And then when we were doing the work, it was picked up in local news. We had BBC Northwest come out and do a piece. It was in the local newspaper as well. And then if you follow this path down, that takes you to the beach, which is where we had the June den. And then if you go right, that's the end of another massive track of rosa that we're doing. So that was quite a nice place to have the June den. So we were talking to dog walkers as well, and then we were also catching, that was where anyone was going, who were going for, locals were going for a walk, so it was quite a nice position to be in. So that, the reaction's been mostly positive for that. We haven't had really any negative from this, and the only kind of negatives we've really had is foragers wanting the rose hips. So we have very nicely just pointed them to the foragers code, and that we are a protected site and they shouldn't really be foraging on a protected site. And that really has been the only pushback that we've had. Looking at our legacy, is keeping on top of regrowth or maybe some missed spots. The contractors for both Incumbria and herbicide have been really good and have been really vigilant, but they are going to miss little bits, and that is inevitable. So we're going to have a watching brief for new patches, and then we want to continue to let people know what's going on when we're going back and we're treating them, not just think that, oh, they're going to remember what we're doing. We're going to keep telling them what we're doing and why. Some of the Incumbria in particular, like Richard was saying, lots of litter. There was one area that apparently used to be a dump, so that we've got a little bit of litter come up from that, which we will probably get Sefton Council to deal with more than getting members of the public to come out. But other areas, we're going to get some litter picks going. We're going to work with the Marine Conservation Society, so we'll have another partnership there as well. And then what we really want to look at as well is engaging with garden centres in coastal areas and the gardening world, so it's been really interesting to hear how you've done that. And there was, I think it was a couple of years ago now, there was an article in Gardeners World who kind of recommended Japanese rose as a really nice hedge plant. So we really want to do a bit of work on that in the future. So that's the kind of legacy that we want to do, but it's been really good. So we're going to go into our question and answer section. So if you just give us a few minutes to get us all set up, and then we'll start taking questions. Hello everyone, so we're set up and ready for the question and answers for the panel for the invasive species section. So I think, are we going online first?
So the first question we have from online is, what happens to all the good bugs in the soil when the soil is disturbed? No natural methods, catch it early as it will be everywhere. And I think that was directed towards Reinhardt.
Bugs?
Bugs, insects.
Let's say we didn't really think about bugs in our project, like bugs in the soil. So yeah, we dig up to 1 meter in depth, I say, but yeah, I think in these cases some bugs will be sifted with the sieve, but I think most bugs are smaller than 2 centimeters, so they will just get through the sieve and be in the dunes again. So I don't think it will be a big problem. A lot of bugs will take advantage of our project, like Cicindela maritima, it likes the sand dunes, it will benefit from the sable, the sand.
Okay, any more questions? Can I just remind everybody to just introduce themselves, please, as well?
Hello, it's Jules Creer, and this is a question for Reinhardt. When you have sieved all the sand and it drops back out onto the area where you cleared, do you spread it out? Do you put little micro topography in there? How do you deal with that?
We just reprofile it as it was in its original state. Yeah.
Hi, Neil Wilkie, EU Monitor. There's a common tool being used by everyone, and it's our old friend Mr. Glyphosate. I think we'll all agree it's not a matter of if it gets banned, it's more when it gets banned. It's clearly a major tool in the toolbox. That toolbox will be a bit empty when that happens. How are we thinking about that?
I'm planning on getting it all done before it's
I'm quite interested in using goats, if we can. I know they are difficult, but if there is a possibility with the no fence collars, that maybe the follow up, particularly because when we cleared this large stands and we do get regrowth, so whether I understand, I read somewhere that they quite like the new growth of seabirds, so that might be a management tool if we can sort out with the no fence. I know the RSPB with the Celtic Rainforest project, they're trialling no fence collars actually in the site in Carlisle, so I'm looking to them to see if we can get that sorted and maybe use goats on the dunes in Pembroke and other sites for seabirds under control.
I think our contractor, who's been really good, he's been doing little experiments of what other herbicide that he can do, and he did a lot of research. That's how we ended up with this targeted herbicide. So we have tried to kind of stay away from glyphosate as much as we can, and yeah, we'll try and get it done as quickly as we can.
Yeah, I think digging will be the thing that I will turn to. It'll just take long.
Yeah, I think in some cases you don't have another option than using chemical treatments. For instance, when you have gas pipelines, okay, in these cases we will use the chemical ones, but indeed in all the other cases we will use the digging.
Richard?
Yeah, I agree. At the moment we've got to use glyphosate near to watercourses, so you can't use a selective. If that's banned, then, as John said, you're going to go back to digging if you can.
I'm Paul Rooney from Liverpool University. I'm going to ask another awkward question. Fantastic work that's going on with the control of alien species. Some really constructive, really creative solutions to that. Well done, fantastic. Great to see the Rosaregosa off the Sefton coast. It was one of my students who first raised this. In the British Isles, none of you have mentioned the most visually obvious and extensive alien species on sand dunes, which is pine plantations. Can I have your views on that, please? And bearing in mind that on some internationally important sites, they're still planting pine trees on SAC.
Well, we've got, on South Coast, as you all know, we've got red squirrels. which we do have to manage the sites for, but we are doing quite a lot of work. We're thinning, for the red squirrels we do have to plant some younger species to keep that population going, but we do it much further back. We don't plant in the frontal woodlands. As part of the project, we are going to be doing a consultation on getting a management plan together for our frontal woodlands, because they haven't been managed for a long time, and they are starting to fall into the sea. So we will be working with the public for that. I do know that we work with our golf courses to kind of educate their members about the pines, especially when we've had the big storms and a lot of them come down. The members have wanted them to be replanted, so we've done quite a lot of work with the members there and also the staff to kind of explain why we don't want them to replant and what else they can do. And with the golf courses, that's been going really well, and we have had a few change of the opinions and even been told to keep up the good work from some of the members in the golf courses.
In Belgium we will tackle the pines during the Dunias. Some we will reform to 2180, so to endemic dune forest. And other pine plantations we will convert into 2130, that's the dune grassland. So there we will also remove the upper layer of litter.
Ben Sampson, Swansea University. We've heard a lot about the woody invasives. What about some of the herbaceous ones? I saw Solidargo was listed as one of the key species, the early goldenrod, Canadian goldenrod, also things like Michaelmas daisy. How are people tackling things like that? Is anyone tackling them? I'd like to know. I've got a couple of really big stands at Crumlin Burrows that I've not started tackling yet, but want to know what the best practice will be there. I can't find anything in the literature at the moment, really.
What species you are talking about?
Solidargo, the non-native goldenrods,
okay,
and the aster species, Michaelmas daisy.
Yeah, this is a very big problem in Belgium, but we see it escape sometimes from private gardens. People just dump their waste over there in our dunes. And I think we did some mowing, but that doesn't work very well, so I think you have to sieve it out also. But it doesn't grow very deep, the rooting system, so I think you can maybe dig 30 or 40 centimeter maximum and then sieve it.
Luc Jalen from Waternet in Netherlands. I heard some great stories, it's amazing work you're doing. And I'm very into it. I was at the meeting from Reinhardt and great stuff on the horizon scanning. And I'm wondering if you have ideas of how to come to an early warning system and share all that information, because the species keep on spreading. So how to implement an early warning system? And do you have any ideas on the panel?
Well, we are implementing it on a Belgian scale via observation.org. So managers get a notice when a plant is observed in their nature terrain, and then we can do a quick response. But indeed, that's a very good question, how we should do it in the entire coastal region. Maybe it can be integrated in the entire Observado system, that's on a larger scale.
Maybe it's something that we can put into iNaturalist or a similar app that site managers can sign up to, and then they get a notification when it's been spotted on their sites, maybe.
I think I've got so many problems with sea bugs on at the moment, although I've noticed that we have got other species coming in, such as stinking iris, bamboo. I'm a little bit worried if bamboo as well, and connections that are coming in. So yeah, I mean, we use our record on the sites, but yeah, maybe working the systems following what we're doing would be a good idea. So because we're just looking at photos that you can see from Cumbria with the sea ducks on, they can quickly get out of hand.
So that's great, everyone. So I think we are going to have to finish for our tea break. So thank you to our panel, and thank you for all the questions, and I hope everyone's found that really interesting.